And we're live.
This is episode 12, isn't it?
Yep, so welcome back. As Rob just said, it's episode 12. And this is going to be part 2 of our cancel culture that seems to be a bigger epidemic right now than COVID. Because even in countries where COVID isn't such a big problem, like Australia right now and New Zealand and all that, cancel culture is still happening. Like
in fact, it's getting worse.
Me. Now, the first thing I do want to mention, part of this cancel culture, and this came up in my Facebook newsfeed about a month or so ago, and I'm bringing it up now because this Sunday is Anzac Day. Now, I've said for many, many years, I've said it to my boss, I've said it to family members, I'd work Christmas and New Year's if I can get my Anzac Day off, so I can go in to the city and I can sit on the sidelines and cheer on our veterans, whether they're old veterans or newer veterans or just are now military. Because if shit hits the fan, even the people that are in the military now are going to be defending my life. I'm going to be defending my family's life. Whether we agree with war or not, these people are going to defend us. And it came to my attention that there is this big thing about them wanting to cancel Anzac Day because they don't think it's relevant anymore. And it's also got to do with the atrocities of what's happened in past wars when it comes to how we've treated the enemy. Now, on a personal, before I pass over to you, Rob, to see what you think, on an extreme personal note, I come from a family background of military. My mother was in the Air Force. My father was in the Army. My stepfather was in the Army. My son's father was in the Navy. I've got my stepsister's son is in the Navy. I've got a family history of the military. Didn't matter of my level of fitness. I never would have joined the military regardless of my history because I personally don't believe in war. But saying that, I have the utmost respect for these people who are willing to put their lives at risk and who have put our lives at risk and some who died to save our lives, to save our country. So whether you agree with it or not, the life you have right now, if you're happy in it, it's because people have defended your way of life. And there's a difference between not agreeing with it and not supporting war and not agreeing with the military defending our country and our way of life. Big difference.
Absolutely. Yep.
And personally, these people that want to cancel Anzac Day when it's not just a tradition, it is something where we get to stop and say, thank you for giving me my way of life. I might have agreed with how it happened, but I love my way of life. I have such freedoms. that if you didn't do what you did, we wouldn't be here. Now, we have part of our group is a country and western singer in Canada, and he sings the most heartfelt and beautiful song to do with veterans, and it's to do with Remembrance Day more so than Anzac Day, but still holds up. And one of the lines that he says, all gave some, but some gave all. And just that one line, every time I hear it, it breaks my heart, because he's 100% true. All of our military have given some, but some of our military have given up their lives. And for these cancel culture, social justice pigs to turn around and show disrespect to these people, it's just, you can't do that. And I'll tell you a very quick story, and then I promise I'll pass over to you, Rob. My stepfather, excuse me, and his father were both in World War II, and they were fighting in Papua New Guinea. I could have this story so wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm pretty right on the mark here. Anyway, my stepfather's father was coming down the hill on a stretcher, and my stepfather was walking up. And this is a part where I'm not 100% sure about. Either they missed each other and they didn't see each other, or they did see each other and said what they had to, gave a personal hello or whatever. But my stepfather's father died. And I think that was a extremely heart-wrenching story, knowing that even whether you saw him or not, the fact that you passed them and that was the last time you saw your father is heart-wrenching. And these are the stories that these people are disrespecting. Now, I've given my almost 8 minutes of dialogue on this. It's over to you.
No, thanks. So first thing I wanted to say, I guess, is there are wars and then there are wars too. So, I mean, there have been some wars that Australia probably got itself involved in that maybe it shouldn't have, so political reasons and so forth. Then there was World War II, a war where the country was directly threatened, as well as a large number of other democracies in the world were threatened. I actually have a relative, Fenner Brockway, who's quite famous in the UK, and he was actually an avowed pacifist for virtually his entire life. But the exception was actually World War II. During World War II, and actually during the Spanish Civil War, and then going into World War II, he actually recruited to go fight fascists during those wars. So, and then he went back to being a pacifist after that. So I think it certainly does show that there are, I hate to say just wars, but there are wars that need to be fought. As for my family, both of my grandfathers served in the military during World War II. One of my grandmothers was in the Women's Land Army. One of my grandfathers fought in the islands north of Australia, defending the continent. So, yes, this is absolutely something I think that is very important to a lot of people here and around, and certainly and in New Zealand and similar days in other countries. And I have to say, the SJWs this time, I think if they're going to pick a fight over Anzac Day, they're going to lose. And I think possibly they've bitten off more than they can chew this time. It's often the case when we raise concerns about SJWs and so forth, we're often dismissed and say, oh, that they're just a loud minority and they're not really important. That's not true, because they're affecting our laws in a variety of different ways. but they're never satisfied, and they will just keep on going until they are stopped. And I have to say, in more recent years, with things like Broward College, people are starting to realise that this is the serious problem. But certainly, picking a fight over Anzac Day, I would suggest, from their perspective, was ill-advised, because they will lose this.
Yeah, I'll fight tooth and nail for it personally, but I think a majority of Australia and New Zealand, for that matter, yeah, I agree. I'm a pacifist. I hate war. Put down your guns. I still have that picture in my head of like the Vietnam War, where it was make love, not war. I still wholeheartedly believe in that. But as you said, there are some times when we just had to go to war, especially in World War II. They bombed Darwin.
Mm.
You know, there was Sydney was, you know, there was Japanese submarines around Sydney. We had to protect our country.
That's right, exactly. And there was a serious threat to the country, and more generally to, as I said, really to democracy. I mean, if you look at it, there were a series of autocratic states that were gobbling up more land all over the world, whether it's in Europe or Asia, wherever it happened to be. I mean, if you look at China, the Chinese fought the Japanese invaders for a decade before they were defeated in 1945. So this had been going on for a long time, and it was all about autocratic states taking more and more land and becoming more and more powerful.
Yeah, we've got it. This is one fight. They'll never win. The social justice warriors, they can come out and say what they want to say. This is one cancel culture that is not going to get cancelled.
Here in Australia, we of course have the Return Services League, or as it's usually just called, the RSL. Quite a wealthy and powerful organisation. It represents veterans' interests in many regards. They are actually the owners of the Anzac trademark, and in particular, I know for a fact that they give a general permission for anyone to produce Anzac biscuits, which were a type of biscuit that was used actually during World War One.
Mm-hmm.
But they prohibit anyone from producing Anzac cookies, pleased to say. And they control that, and they're obviously heavily involved in Anzac Day, and I think they will be bringing their considerable resources to address this problem.
Because it's not just there are so many. My mother had got a Order of Australia medal back in I think it was 2007, 2008 for her work with Legacy and her work through an RSL.
Mm-hmm.
On a personal thing, you shit on me all you like, you shit on my family, you better become with more than just words, because I will bury you. Because this is a personal thing, but I think for every Australian, it's a personal thing.
Absolutely, it is. They're not going to win this, and as we've said before, and I must admit I hadn't picked up on this particular one until you mentioned it tonight, Nat. But this will be something that now I am aware of it. I'll be paying attention with Anzac Day just a few days away.
Now, we'll move off Anzac Day because I could talk about that for an hour and a half. Something that actually popped up on my Facebook post once again, actually the day after we did our first cancel culture video last week, was about a popular TV series on the ABC. I think it's called Bluey, and it's under fire for lack of diversity, where other disabled, queer, poor, and single-parent dog families.
It's a kid's show, that's right.
It's a kid's show.
Exactly.
Now, it still brings us back to last week when we discussed the cancellation of Pepe Le Pew and whatever the other one was, and that, they're going to cancel Bugs Bunny because of transgender. Are they going to cancel Porky Pig because of speech impediments. These are kids shows. Kids don't necessarily see gender. Kids don't necessarily see color. I mean, you always see that beautiful meme where you see a white child hugging a black child, and it's like kids aren't born racist, they're raised racists. So
That's right.
kids don't see anything wrong with gay, transgender, skin color, religion, race, anything. Kids don't see that. They just see a kid that they want to play with. So how are you going to diversify a cartoon when the kids don't see it? They're still not going to understand because they don't know a rich kid from a poor kid. They don't see an ugly kid from a beautiful kid. They don't see disabilities. They don't see nothing. They just want to see a kid. They just want to play with a kid.
Bluey, by the way, for those who don't know, it's a kids show, quite new, I think. So basically, in Australia, blue heelers are a popular Australian cattle dog, and Bluey is, of course, a family of blue heelers living in Brisbane, not far from me. And yes, they've actually had 2 episodes actually taken offline, actually, because they used a particular term during the episodes, and from when they appear to have had 1 single complaint already and had 2 episodes taken off. Apparently the episodes were remastered and put back on again. That was a few months ago. So a single word, and I believe that word was ooga booga, and that was enough to get 2 episodes taken offline. So now, of course, we've got yet another attack on poor old Bluey and his family.
Yeah. And this cartoon, from my understanding, it's won awards for how well it's actually made. Now,
exactly. So I gather it's getting popular overseas too.
Yeah. Now, there was one. This actually came from one complaint, and unfortunately, haven't got a clip for this one. I think it was Woolworths that called chicken wings boomerang wings because of the shape of them look like a boomerang. There was one complaint, not even a complaint, it was just a suggestion that this might not be culturally appropriate, and they changed the name of the chicken from boomerang wings to triangle wings or something.
So everything,
and it wasn't even a complaint.
Yeah, right.
It was just, is this appropriate?
So even saying boomerang isn't appropriate now.
Yeah, because it might be offensive. Now, and I've never heard of the term before. I always thought they were chicken wings. But apparently the term boomerang wings is popular in Australia. Where nobody's offended.
I hadn't encountered it.
No, me neither. But apparently in this article I read, apparently it's popular, apparently it's widely used, but somebody, and I can't even blame the person, they were just making sure that it was appropriate, that it got cancelled. They cancelled the word boomerang because it's shaped like a boomerang. It is.
And last time I said I'd say this several times, and I think I only said it once, but then technically this is part 2 of cancel culture, so I think it's part of a continuation of the same episode. So I'm just going to say context is important, and I'm going to endeavour to say that at least twice more before the episode is over. So in terms of boomerang wings, I mean, in terms of particular term that may be used on Bluey, context is important, and that seems to be what SJWs have a lot of trouble with, the concept of.
Yeah. Now they have a problem with fairy bread. We'll continue on with the food. Somebody has a problem with the word fairy bread. Now, for anybody that isn't in Australia, or for anybody that is in Australia and doesn't know what it is, it's literally white bread, margarine, hundreds and thousands.
Yeah, which does exist overseas, but is not called fairy bread.
No. And now I'm imagining, because it's a kid's birthday party food, fairy comes from literal little mythical creatures with wings that fly around in the English countryside gardens. It's got nothing to do with the LGBTQ, community. It's, excuse me, it is seriously got to do with these tiny little mythical creatures with wings, fairy bred, because it's, you say it's unicorn, like this new rainbow thing is unicorn this and unicorn that. Same difference. Are people that have got a horn coming out of the middle of their head going to be offended by the unicorn phase that's going on? If anything, if we're going to cancel anything, and I've seen it a couple of times where people are now identifying as animals. So there's people identifying as themselves as wolves, and people identifying themselves as horses and unicorns.
I believe they're fairies.
Yeah, here's what, and I'm going to attack myself here. So I'm a fat girl. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to say plus size or big. I'm fat. It's plain and simple. If I turned around and said to people who called me fat and said, no, you're wrong, because I identify myself as a skinny person, doesn't stop me from being fat. So,
well, the difference between reality and that which is not real, isn't it? And this does seem to be something that they have a lot of problems with. We discussed last week, I've got a few friends that are transgender. They identify as the opposite gender. That's actually possible, like biologically and mentally, it is possible. But me identifying myself as skinny, when quite obviously I'm not, it's just idiotic. So you can't not see yourself as human. You're human first. So I wanted to mention a few other areas where we've seen cancel culture. Now, this is going back a few years. People within men's rights and around anti-feminism will know about this, but a lot of other people won't. But we've been seeing this for quite a long time. We've actually seen a series of events shut down. There were some fairly famous speeches that occurred at the University of Toronto around 2012, 2013. In particular, there's one by Janice Fiamengo, who's a member of our community, and another one by Warren Farrell, also a member of our community. They've both spoken at ICMIs. I've had the pleasure of meeting Janice at ICMI 16. I've talked to her online quite a bit. Have spoken to Warren too, but not as much over the years. But they have both had their events attacked at the University of Toronto, where, by the way, I used to work. Although that was before, I think I left there in 2007 or something like that. So anyway, the University of Toronto, they had a couple of, in particular, Janice and Warren had speeches at different times. What happened was feminists would come in and they would shout down the speaker. So whoever it happened to be, whether it's someone introducing Janice or Janice herself, whatever, they would shout them down. They would use vuvuzelas to sort of make noise, to make it impossible for the speech to occur. And there was a rather infamous situation that I want to mention, and that was the pulling of the fire alarm. At one of these speeches, the fire alarm was pulled, which of course by law required everybody to leave the building. Everybody left the building as doing the right thing. Fire department came. Of course, it was a false activation. But nobody was ever charged in relation to that, billed or charged. I imagine the university was probably billed actually, but there was no follow-up on that at all. And they were simply showed that they could do this, they could act in this way with impunity. And of course, we said at the time, well, that will just make them worse. So they'll see they're getting away with it and they'll just get worse. And that's where we are today. And we have always when we're doing all of our events in Australia or overseas, we're always mindful of this and always trying to protect ourselves from it. But the reality is they're entitled to act in this manner and shut down other people having speaking and cancelling them, as we now call it, and they get away with it. And there's very, very little done in the way of any sort of recourse to them. And of course, one of those events was actually where Big Red appeared. Now, she's actually quite famous. She actually appears in the Red Pill documentary, and I must admit I smiled, possibly smirked, when I saw that she was actually listed as Big Red. So Big Red is a feminist who engaged with a few people, including Dan Perrins, who's been involved with the Voice for Men and other organisations over many years. Dan's not involved in Voice for Men anymore, but he was for many years. Anyway, Big Red engaged with him and other MRAs at what I think it was a 2012 event at the University of Toronto, and that's of course it was that footage, of course, that resulted in her getting famous.
There was that, and I think she basically is just famous for those few 10 seconds of verbal toxic abuse of "I'm speaking, mother," beep. And she was like, "Shut that up."
She did say the F word quite a lot.
Yeah, it was like every second word was from this and that, and it was like, "Are you kidding me? You're trying to get your message across and not seem like a toxic feminist. Shut up! Like, just yes, I swear, but I don't sit there and I just I can't.
The truth is that's the ideology, and that's the way they are. I mean, she's perhaps she's larger than life, and particularly an egregious example, perhaps. But the reality is, if you look at all the different ways they're approaching things across the world, it's screaming and swearing and stripping off naked. I have to say, I've seen feminists go naked so many times now that it's just the expected behaviour. So they still seem to act like everyone will be shocked when they rip their clothes off, but no, that's what they do. I wrote an article on that on A Voice for Men, where I documented quite a number of cases where they've done this. It's quite common, and it's really interesting actually to look at it and look at the state response, where you've effectively got a bunch of women who've just taken their clothes off, and the state does nothing anymore. They don't care.
I actually had a conversation similar to this with a work colleague today, and he said that he wouldn't be allowed to look at female strippers because the feminists, and I'm paraphrasing here, the feminists were basically saying you're objectifying women. Now, I've been to male strip clubs, and the women are atrocious. They rip the clothes off these men. They're sexually assaulting them. They are truly and truly objectifying these men. I've been to female strip clubs. The guys are sitting back, having a couple of beers, looking at some tits and ass, throw a couple of bucks at them, and that's it. I don't see the same objectification of the females when it comes to female strippers as the males when it comes to male strippers. If a woman wants to walk down the street naked and a male wants to walk down the street naked, trust me, both are going to get objectified.
Yeah. So this is a good point to drop in something. It's a little bit off topic with our cancel culture, but there's a professor, he's actually a retired law professor here in Queensland, Dr. David Burgess, I believe is his name. I purchased a study that he wrote a few years ago. He argued, and I think he's conclusively proven, that it is not, nor has it ever been, illegal for women to be naked in Queensland in public. So the way the law is written, it says you have to expose your genitals, and the courts have consistently ruled that men are exposing their genitals by standing there and women aren't. And there was a case, I wrote an article on this too, there was a case in a well-known nudist beach in Queensland. Now, in Queensland, there are no legal nudist beaches, but there are a few where it's been tolerated historically. And police went there one day and started writing tickets for all the men who were naked. and ignoring all the women who were naked, who were in some cases standing right next to them. And after this, actually, I think Dr. Burgess had already been looking into it, but it became a bit more of a topical after this. And he pointed out, he went right through Queensland legal records and could find no examples of women ever having been charged in relation to public nudity in Queensland. And a couple of years ago, there were actually 3 women who were having sex on the street in Brisbane, and the police broke it up because of sort of a public disturbance. But again, nobody was charged in relation to being naked because the police knew well they couldn't charge them. It's never been illegal in Queensland.
Because the genitals are basically
are not exposed.
Inside.
So theoretically, a woman could get charged if she did something that exposed her genitals. Is pretty much the argument. But then nobody could find any examples where this has actually happened. Okay. So in effect, it's legal for women to walk around naked in Queensland, according to Dr.
I'm going to be quite crude here. So if a woman sat there, legs spread, clit on show, she could basically only then be arrested.
But even then, it doesn't appear to have ever happened, no matter what. I mean, as I said, there were 3 women in Brisbane having sex on the street, and the police still didn't charge neither in relation to any indecent exposure.
Okay, so if nobody sees the hypocrisy of this now, like there's a perfect example.
Yep.
And they are 2 naked human beings. Just because female genitalia is a bit more tucked away, for lack of a better term, and men's naked bodies is a little bit more on show.
Out there. Now, we do see this around the rest of the world. It's not quite as clear cut as Queensland, but this was the gist of the article I wrote, that everywhere we look in the Western world, it's basically legal for women to walk around naked now. It's either actually legal, or it's as in de jure, or it's de facto legal, where the police won't do anything about it. There are a couple of documented cases in the US, Halloween last year or the year before, probably a couple of years ago now with COVID-19. One woman in particular went to a Halloween party as naked human, and of course it made the papers, but there was nothing done about it because, as far as I can tell, anywhere in the Western world now, it's not illegal for her to do that. It's illegal for a man to do it. If a man went to a party naked, he'd be bundled off by the police in no time. That's the way
I'm gonna leave that one because I'm so glad you brought it up, but I'm doing the Nathan feeling where I just literally have no words because
it's almost
to me
comical.
Doesn't make sense.
It's almost comical. And if you read the article I wrote on the Voice for Men, which I'll post down below, you'll see that I've documented cases all around the world of feminists walking around naked and police looking on. In fact, the only case that I'm aware of anywhere where a woman was arrested in relation to public nudity in recent years was actually in the UK, where there's a German performance artist, and she was going around Europe letting people fondle her genitals as performance art. And the British police actually took a bit of an exception to that and arrested her. But they were the only ones. French police, German police, no problem at all. But she went to the UK and tried it, and they did actually take her off the street.
I'm going to say something. The human body, when naked, is like an eclipse. You don't, if it's out where it shouldn't be, you don't particularly want to look at it because it's going to be bad for you. But male or female, you're going to freaking well look. Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether you're gay, straight, bi, whatever.
It's going to draw your attention.
Yeah. I'm straight, if I see a naked female walk past me, I'm going to have a look. And I'm pretty sure that if you see a naked male walking past you and you're straight, you're going to go, that guy's straight. And I can see his dingling.
And if somebody's ignoring it, they're purposefully ignoring it.
Yeah, that's it. It's because it's out of the norm. It's got nothing to do with the fact that it has got a lot to do with the fact that they're naked. You want to see the dingling in the boobs. Let's face it. But it's kind of got nothing to do with the fact that they're naked. It's got to do with the fact that it's out of the norm. Yes. And I'll give you what could be considered racist, and I'm hoping it's not. I grew up in Manly. Manly's a very white, or was a very white area of Sydney. Yeah, you had a couple of Kiwis, you had a couple of Asians, but it was a very white part of Sydney, especially because it was a surfing culture.
Mm.
I came down to Melbourne back in 2002 for just over a year, and I was in Brunswick, and I walked up Sydney Road and saw my first fully clad Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
The whole gauze and everything. I was so not used to seeing it that I did like, oh my God, that's real. It's not. I always thought it was some type of in another country. It wasn't in Australia. So because it was out of the norm, I was looking, and a lot of people have said, I've told this story to, have said, Natalie, that's so racist. And it's like, it's not. It's got nothing to do with who or what they are. It's because I'm not used to seeing it. And I'm very open-minded and a very cultured person. But I grew up in a very predominantly white community where, you had the one or two, you had like out of 100 people, there'd be about 20 Kiwis and 10 Asians. The rest were all white. There was no such thing as back then. Could be different now, but back then there was, your European. When I say white, I mean Europeans, Italians, Greeks, all that sort of part of Europe. But there was no. Oh, please do not take this offensively, and I don't mean any offense by it. But there was no Muslims. It was a very Christian. It was a very Christian area back then. So it just took me by surprise that, oh my God, these people do exist in Australia. It's not just in the Middle East.
I actually had a similar start once. So I was in Egypt. I've travelled in the Middle East, and I was in Egypt. And I was actually waiting in line to go into a location. I think there's a large tower in the middle of Cairo. It's the same height as the pyramids of Giza, and the highest one, and about 400 meters. And anyway, I was waiting in line, and I happened to turn around, and there was a lady behind me, and I'd never seen it before. I think I have seen it once or twice since, but never before. And you couldn't see her eyes. She was completely covered, and you couldn't see her eyes. And I think that's what I actually did get a bit of a start, but it was because I couldn't see her eyes. And of course, then I adjusted pretty quickly. But yes, if you encounter something that you haven't seen before, it is quite a shock.
Let's turn it off people for a second. If you see a Lamborghini drive past you, or a Lamborghini on the street, you're going to stop and look at the Lamborghini because you hardly see Lamborghinis. It's the same type of thing. It doesn't mean you're insensitive towards race, religion, whatever. If you're not used to seeing something like that, it is quite not startling, but you're just not used to it. So if you see somebody naked walking past you, you're not objectifying them. You're just not used to seeing a naked person.
Exactly.
Trust me, I am so not used to seeing a naked person. I mean, if I could, I'd shower with my clothes on. But you're so not used to seeing somebody naked out on the street that if I was to see somebody naked, I'm sorry, I would have a good look.
Yeah,
male or female.
As I said, if you and those people who aren't looking are purposefully aren't looking. So
they're sort of going.
Still affecting their behaviour one way or another.
So you're doing it for shock. So for these people are doing it so these feminists that are doing it, they're doing it for shock value. You know what? You're not shocking me. You're pissing me off because I'm sorry. I don't want to see your I don't want to see your tits. Me, I didn't give a shit what the men think. I don't want to. It's like, people have a problem with gay people making out. I don't have a problem with gay people making out. I have a problem with people making out in front of me. If you're sticking your tongue down somebody's throat, the first thing I'm going to say is get a room. Gay, straight, bi, transgender, whatever the friggin' heck you are. I don't want to see you playing tonsil hockey in public.
Look, they're overdoing it, and this is why it's not even shocking anymore. I mean, yes, there's the fact that there's always a moment where you see someone naked in the street and it draws your attention. But in terms of the bigger picture of them shocking everybody, maybe that worked once. I mean, Lady Godiva did it several hundred years ago, which, by the way, I believe was a tax protest. I believe that's what that was actually about. But I think probably 400 years ago, that probably did shock people a bit. But now it's actually so common. I mean, there's a lecturer, a university lecturer in the UK, feminist, who has a habit of stripping off during her lectures. Now, I'm afraid I don't recall her name. I can look that up and post that down below the video. But I mean, it's now so common now. I think it's becoming a little bit comical, actually, to be honest.
If you want to make the naked body pedestrian, fine, do that. But trust me, I'm going to be the strange one walking out that door with fully clothed. Because I don't even go to nudist colonies. I don't go to nudist beaches. I don't go to beaches because I just look like one of those big whales you want to push back in the ocean. But you're doing it for the wrong. You're setting the wrong message, because the men are still. If somebody is going to purposely look or not purposely look at you, if they are looking at your tits and saying what a great rack, but there's 10 times more people saying put the tits away. I don't want to see them.
Yeah, they're a bit over it.
Yeah, no offense, but as fat as I am, my tits are spectacular. I don't need to see yours. I'll just go and look in the mirror and look at mine. Whatever thing that you're objectifying to, by seeing the naked body, it's like, I don't want to see anybody naked out on the street. What's it doing to young kids that, and people are going to come up with the excuse that, the naked body is beautiful, you shouldn't hide it from young kids. I'm going to hide it from young kids because Lena Dunham, who apparently got attacked by MRAs for sexually assaulting her sister when it wasn't quite like that. She was a very young kid herself, and I think she was about 8 or 9, and said to her sister, I want to look and see what's up inside. It was very innocent, childlike behavior.
I agree. It was. She was a child, and
it was just innocent, childlike behavior. She wasn't sexual assault in any way, shape, or form. Still don't like Lena Dunham. She can jump off. No, I won't say that. Still don't like her, but it wasn't a sexual assault as portrayed by the feminists that MRAs have said, because no MRA has ever said it. But children should just be children, and to objectifying them to seeing the naked body of an adult, I think, is very much crossing the line. I'm not saying pedophilia. I'm just saying I objectifying the fact that a young child has to see a grown woman or a grown man naked.
It can at least, as any parent knows, it can invite some unfortunate questions maybe the parent doesn't want to answer right at that moment. Perhaps that's something they're leaving till later. Yeah, it's right. It isn't the case with humans too, even at our most basic level, that anything goes. This seems to be an assumption actually broadly across Western civilization, and I think there's plenty of evidence that that isn't the case. There is such a concept as natural justice, and they've proven that even toddlers, for example, recognise when they're being wronged. So that there is a concept of innate. There are concepts of innate beliefs, and there are things that there are lines we shouldn't cross in society.
No, and I think I support your right to protest in whatever shape or form you want to protest it. I just think you can do it with your clothes on and still get your message across.
Yes, and I suspect they'd probably find that people would take them more seriously too.
Yeah, 100%. I'd listen to somebody if they go up and confronted me with their story. I'd listen to them more if they had clothes on. If I had to sit there and some girl with her tits hanging out, she probably, no, I won't say that. But I'd be doing what guys are accused of doing, where she's going, "Hey, my eyes are up here." I'd be looking at her tits. I'm sorry, I would be, because
there was a great meme that was circulating in anti-feminist groups online for a while, a few years back, and it had this feminist dressed up as an enormous vulva, and she's saying, "Why don't they take her seriously anymore?"
That's why.
See if I can find it. Yeah.
Okay, so we are at 45 minutes. We didn't want to go past half an hour, but we did steer off the path. I think we have come to the conclusion that cancel culture has its place in a very minority part of the world, but in the vast majority where people are kicking up a stink and wanting things, general everyday things, cancelled, kids' cartoons, food, movies, TV shows, anything. Like, we couldn't play. Imagine if they made Mel Brooks movies the way they did back in the 70s and 80s. They couldn't do it today.
They couldn't.
And Mel Brooks is a perfect example.
I love Mel Brooks movies. Yeah. He's fantastic.
Like, if and I think the perfect example from a great Mel Brooks movie to go to see is History of the World Part 1 and Blazing Saddles.
Absolutely. And another one I want to mention, there's a music, he actually dabbled in music a little bit too, and there's a music video, I think it's called The Hitler Rap. If I can, I'll post that below the video as well. If you have an opportunity, definitely look at it. Something that I didn't notice, it was pointed out to me. If you look at it though, his uniform, he's dressed up as Hitler in the video. He doesn't have any SWAT stickers on his uniform, which I thought was a nice touch. There are other SWAT stickers around the room. Yeah. He's avoided actually putting SWAT stickers on his uniform, and I never picked it up. It's pointed out to me.
Mel Brooks, I think, is a king of comedians. I've loved his movies for many years. We're talking about, besides History of the World Part 1 and Blazing Saddles, Frankenstein, the silent movie, that one scene with Marcel Marceau always gets me. Spaceballs and Men in Tights. We're talking about great classic comedy, but they couldn't do it nowadays. Trying to cancel Grease, all these classic movies, and cancel books, but it's going back to the movie Footloose, where they couldn't listen to rock and roll music and they couldn't read certain books, and Treasure Island was all this getting cancelled, and they're trying to now cancel classic books like To Kill a Mockingbird. Stop. That's enough. Yeah.
So
cancel culture's got a very, very, very tiny, minute part where it should take place, but
I wouldn't even call
99.9% of it, leave it the fuck alone.
I wouldn't even call it cancel culture in those cases, to be honest. There may be some constraints about not just doing everything in society, but then cancel culture is really about shutting down individuals or shutting down particular instances, like boomerang biscuits, boomerang cookies.
Boomerang links. Yeah, the only part I've ever agreed with as far as cancelling anybody is the principal of Broward College. Get her fired. She doesn't deserve the post.
Well, that's just, I would call that, rather than cancel culture, I would call that just firing the principal.
Yeah, because I think what she's done is 100% wrong.
In my view, she can say what she wants, but I think she probably shouldn't be a principal of a high school.
Yeah.
So I've got a message though for a quick message for proponents of cancel culture. There are plenty of people out there who think it's okay, who think that they're protected because they're right in there with the orthodoxy and so forth. Anybody who thinks that, I'm going to say to you, you are not safe. It doesn't matter how orthodox you are now. And if you don't believe me, look at history. Look at what happened to Robespierre in the French Revolution, for example. He was one of the leaders of the revolution. Look how he ended up.
Yeah.
Many revolutionary leaders end up on the chopping block. You will not be protected just because you are in with these people. They will turn on you. They hold nothing sacred.
You've got to. It's not about erasing the past. It's about remembering the past
Mm.
and not repeating history if it's wrong.
That's right. Learning from the past. Yes. Yeah.
Don't
And that's a
cancel
good. Yep, and that's a good place to end.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nat.
Okay. So
Hope we
we'll
discussed.
don't know what's happening next week, but we'll come up with something just as
We'll work it out.
interesting again. And in a couple of months, depending on how cancel culture's going, we might boomerang wing it back around.
Thanks, Nat.
Okay. Take care. Like,
Bye-bye.
click subscribe. You do what you have to do. Take care, guys.